Chapter 10. Congruent Lifetimes. I would now like to tell you an incredible story that happened to me when I was 19. One of my best friends, Rick, was with me, and we were going off the mountain to go hang out at the mall. I was driving, and he was sitting in the passenger seat. The road we were traveling was a narrow 2-lane road with hairpin turns near the top. We had just passed the hairpin curves, and I accelerated as we rounded the next bend, because I knew there was a long straightaway coming up. I rounded the curve, and all I saw was the shock on the man's face of the oncoming car. I didn't even have time to hit my brakes. It happened so fast. The oncoming car was attempting to pass 3 other cars in the straightaway. I had nowhere to go. 3 cars in the other lane and a mountain on the other. I remember glancing over at my friend and seeing the fear in his eyes. I remember thinking, so this is how it ends. But it didn't end. I was waiting for the impact, but it never came. I looked in the rearview mirror and saw the back end of the car that I was facing a moment before still in my lane. But behind me, what? How could that be? We passed right through it? There was no other explanation. We were silent for a while until I finally broke the silence. Rick, there's no way that we just missed that car. He said, I know. We pulled over at the next pull-off, and both jumped out of the car, both pacing nervously back and forth on either side of the car. We eventually managed to gain our composure before continuing our journey. We never mentioned it again. This was my first clue that something magical was happening behind my back, or should I say, right in front of my nose. We were both spared, but why? Was there another version of us that actually died in that crash, leaving our families and friends to mourn our demise? I always wondered that. Miracles happen every day, but sometimes they disguise themselves as coincidences. I no longer see coincidences, I only see miracles. Less than 2 years later, Rick was killed in a car accident. I still remember the phone call. William called me, another of my close friends. He told me Rick had gone out and gotten himself killed. I didn't want to believe it. I cried all day. Why was Rick spared with me only to be taken 2 years later? I was very bitter for a long time. I couldn't understand how a loving God could take one of my best friends. I was very angry at God. I even went as far as to quit attending church altogether. This may sound like a bad thing, but within this travesty, it led me to rethink who I thought God was. Besides his friendship, that was his greatest gift. Besides his friendship, that was the greatest gift Rick gave me. I miss my friend Rick deeply. I even started to dream about being with him. Funny thing was, I always dreamed about him on the day he died. For the next 4 years, I dreamed about him. During this time, I got married. And at 25 years old, I was blessed with my first son. I had one last dream of Rick that following year. It, for me, was an eye-opener. In the dream, we spent the whole day together, and it was getting late. Rick looked at me and said it was time for him to go. I remember how sad I felt. I said, we didn't have enough time together. He said, I know. I then blurted out, I want you back. He smiled lovingly, and he said, I am back. As his face faded away, my son's face replaced his. Then I woke up. Holy cow! My son is Rick's reincarnation? The idea of reincarnation had never crossed my mind. It wasn't even something I'd ever considered. Until then, many will not even consider the idea of reincarnation. I was taught that when you died, you would go to either heaven or hell. There was no coming back. You didn't exist before you were born, and you had set destinations when you left. Can you imagine yourself never being? I find it much easier to believe that I had past lives than I do to believe that there was a time when I wasn't. And no, I'm not talking about coming back as a bug or a goat. I believe a human soul will always return as a human soul in order to further its evolution. Why would you want to unevolve? Which leads me to my next subject, reincarnation. I remember as a child waking up to what I call night terrors. It was always the same dream repeated every time. In my dream, I would wake up to find myself trapped or buried with no way out. I could not move. I could not free myself. All I could do was wait. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't do anything. Just lying there trapped, feeling the horror of waiting to die. It was the same scenario every time. Exactly the same. I had the same dream continually until my teen years. I would wake up trembling all over. It was far too real to have not happened. I often wondered as a child if this was how I died in another life. Of course, I was taught that you only had one life, but my experiences seemed to be showing me something else. Was reincarnation an actual fact? Have we lived multiple lives? After I was shown that my son was Rick, reborn, I believed. And I began to think about the concept on a regular basis. I mean, the idea that we only live one single lifetime and everything you learn you must figure out in this one lifetime. Then at the end of it, you're judged by your performance, which determines your next destination, whether it be heaven or hell. Sounds a little drastic to me, and not something a loving God would ever do. The idea of reincarnation rings far more true to me. Not that you will come back as a cow or insect, but as another human, maybe female this time, and living in another country in order to learn a whole different thing and experience all new experiences. Now that makes perfect sense to me. That rings true to my heart. I just don't understand why people refuse this concept. Maybe it is just simple fact that we have little to no memory about these past lives, but I feel that is for a reason. If we came in with full memory of our past lives, we would most likely live our lives in the past instead of focusing on the life we are living. It would be a distraction, but since we come in anew each time, our focus is entirely on this experience, not previous lifetimes. That is the way I see it. I feel we plan each lifetime. Between lives, when we are on spirit side, we choose who we are, as well as the circumstances surrounding that lifetime, including parents, brothers, sisters, and what we wish to learn or accomplish during that lifetime. I see it as a huge, long process with careful planning. Not just something you are spur of the moment dropped into, a well thought out plan. Our lives are not accidents. We all have a reason for being here, even if we have not figured it out yet. Do you wish to learn more for yourself about reincarnation? Then I recommend you find yourself a regression hypnotherapist and explore for yourself. It is a fascinating subject, and the information received is priceless. I've given regressions to others, my sons included, and the information is amazing. Hypnotherapy allows us access directly to the higher self. The higher self is the part of you that stays behind on spirit side. It is your heaven to earth connection. Churches call it the Holy Spirit. It is the same thing, just different terms. You see, you are a multidimensional being. While part of you is here on earth experiencing, there's yet a bigger part of you that stays behind on spirit side, taking care of business there, as well as guiding you here. Remember, you are conscious energy. Anyway, back to hypnotherapy. Being hypnotized allows the therapist to bypass the ego and belief systems. It allows direct connection to the higher self, your true self, which gives you the most pure information. At this level, miracles can be achieved, and healing can take place. Magic is the norm at this level. You are so much more than you have ever imagined. I was talking to a friend about 2 years ago about how I felt. I was there with Jesus during his lifetime. She said, "Yes, you were. I was your brother. I was James." Funny, it didn't hit me all at once. I guess it took a while to sink in. Wait, if she was my brother James, then that meant I was John the Apostle? Then the human side of me said, that is silly. But yet I always rejected all the stories I heard in Sunday school. I remember thinking, that is not at all how it happened. Then I wondered how I would know that. Things started making sense to me. I began having visions as myself being John. One of my visions, I was in a courtyard on the upper deck looking down at all the people. Everyone was talking loudly and all at once. I had something important to say, but all the noise blocked out my voice. I looked over at my brother James and said, I know how to quieten them down. I then levitated from the upper deck up into the air and over the middle of the courtyard, and then dropped down right in the middle of the crowd. You could have heard a pin drop. Then I commenced with my message, telling them who they really are. Funny, because the Bible would tell you that Simon Peter was the one who levitated out over the people, and that was not true. Nor were there magicians who copied the feat. Don't get me wrong, all who are followers of Jesus were able to do miracles. After all, we were taught by the Master. Can I tell you everything word for word about John the Apostle's life? Of course not. Like I said, my focus is on this life, not that life. I've had many lifetimes since the one as John. My perspective is way different because of all my experiences gained during all those other lifetimes. Even my beliefs have changed. That is the thing about progression. Everything changes.